Jumpin In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And it is Saturday night once again at 9 o'clock here at Manx Radio, probably a lot of other places as well. It can only mean one thing: it is Jumpin' In, the best in modern and contemporary jazz with H and Chris as well, and of course, a bit of a special this evening.
Yes, we welcome along to this week's show. Too many Easter eggs, I reckon, as we catch up with saxophonist Trish Clowes as she sets off on an album launch tour with a fantastic My Iris band. But before that, as we all prepare our eggs for rolling, race our ducks and hunt for our Easter bunnies, what extraordinary sounds have you been rolling this week, H? Have you bunnied up, and are all your ducks in a row?
Well, we might dip into a little bit of Masabumi Kikuchi, his final studio album, and I'll stay with the Japanese theme if we've got time with a bit of Thomas Fujiwara.
And from me, we take our time, we look into the distance, there's a nip in the air, and before all that, we spring into step with Dancer in Nowhere from Miho Hazama M Unit. Dancer in Nowhere, the title track from Mio Hozama and her M Unit's earlier album. We have previously featured her with her current Imaginary Visions with the Danish radio big band. She's also the permanent guest conductor for the Metropole Orchestra and associate director of the New York Jazz Harmonic. Following steps of great names like Vince Mendoza as a composer and conductor, her earlier M Unit was a 13-piece band with some great names like Steve Wilson on alto, Jonathan Powell on trumpet, James Shipp on the vibes, Sam Anning on bass and Lionel Luike on guitar.
Very nice indeed. I'm staying with a sort of a Japanese theme this evening to a degree, along with Trish Clowes, who isn't Japanese, of course, just in case you're wondering. But yeah, Masabumi Kikuchi, Pooh, as he was known, a quirky, no, I know it wasn't to everyone's taste, a quirky piano player, one of those piano players, jazz piano players that ploughed his own furrow and just went his own way, regardless of what anyone else thought. By the end, I'm told there was only Paul Motion who'd actually hired him. He died a few years ago, but I always rather liked it. Very sparing, very spacious, almost like he's thinking about each note sometime, but none the worse for that. His last album was the final studio recording on a lovely Steinway Grand called Hanamichi. Here's his version, or one of his versions, he does a couple of takes on this album, of My Favourite Things. Lovely. Lots of space, lots of air. Lovely Steinway Grand recorded there in his final studio album, Hanamichi Masabumi Kikuchi. And yeah, I know there'll be some saying, nah, not for me at all. And I get that. It's not the sort of jazz or playing which is going to appeal to everyone, as I say. But he basically went along his own way throughout his career. But you listen to some of the albums, some of the stuff with Paul Motion, Sunrise, the album that you did, I think the last thing Paul Motion played on, or any of the Tethered Moon albums, and they do become addictive after a while. Wonderful stuff. It is Jumping In, Chris and myself H, or H and myself H, as I said earlier on, I think, or something along those lines.
And Chris and
very
myself,
good indeed. Chris. And we said it was a bit of a special because we're now going to have a chat with saxophonist Trish Clowes. And, well, yes, a favourite here on Jumping In. We've met several times in London and had a nice chat. A wonderful saxophonist, musician and doctor, as she now is.
She is indeed.
Indeed, yes. No slouch. She. A new album out, and I keep getting the title wrong. It's called View with a Room. You've got to get that right. View with a Room. It's with her long-time band, A Different Sound, as I put to her when we spoke to her on the phone a couple of days ago.
Yeah, which hopefully is the right way around. So when everything all went quiet and still and isolated a couple of years ago, I was just about to go on a little tour with those guys. And so I put out a sort of self-release album of live stuff that we'd just sort of done in the last few months, just because it seemed like a nice thing to do. So I kind of did that, and in the meantime, everyone was just sort of at a loss for, you couldn't really hope. You couldn't really. I really struggled to be excited about doing stuff again because it was just too painful, because you just didn't know when you were going to get to do it again. So I kind of initially, I got asked to do a couple of things by people, which was nice, but I also did some of my own things off my own bat as well. So I did some solo instrument writing, which was nice to have the opportunity to use my time to do that. And gradually I sort of started writing bits of things sort of with my band in mind, but again, not really knowing when we were going to get to do anything. And then as sort of live streaming opportunities started appearing like a few months down the line, I just sort of started throwing, obviously no one could really see each other except for when you were, inverted commas, working. So so I didn't really have any time to rehearse or do any of that kind of stuff. So what I did was just write a tune, and, if we were doing a stream, I'd bring it to a sort of sound check when you're meant to be checking all the levels, and just sort of shoehorn it into the set. And cutting a long story short, by the time we got to beginning of last year, or like spring last year, I kind of realised that I had an album's worth of material. So that's how it came together.
Yeah, very exciting indeed. Now, of course, you weren't just sitting on your hands busy composing. You also became Dr. Clowes during your lockdown, didn't you, really? I think that's,
I did, yeah.
I remember you talking
right.
about the amount of work you were having to get through, and it was a great part of that, I think, was the other project you have with your own festival and touring around Emulsion. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my PhD was sort of it was actually quite quite fortuitous, because I was at that stage where I needed to write up everything, and I was really struggling. I was just so busy with other things. I was really struggling to actually do it. So when lockdown started, I was like, obviously it was awful, but it was also like, okay, so I just basically shut myself away, for the first month, and I was just kind of finishing that. And so it was kind of quite weird, like the start of lockdown, because I kind of felt I wasn't really going through all the stuff everybody else was doing, like home baking and all those sorts of things, because I was just trying to desperately get this thing done. So yeah, so that was right at the beginning, although that seems like a long time ago now. And then it was just like having Elastic Band release. So I think a lot of the reason why I started writing so much was just because I hadn't really had my own time. I'd been doing a PhD, so it was just so nice to have time to write and stuff as soon as I'd finished that, the thesis bit kind of off. So that was that. And then Emulsion, I've been running it. I sort of realised when I was emailing someone the other day that it's basically 10 years since the first one. And so when was the last one we did? In 2019, so the autumn just before COVID hit. Yes. And yeah, it's changed loads since I started it, obviously. And I've always run it in a sort of year-to-year kind of way anyway. So I don't put any pressure on myself in terms of what it should be at all. Yeah, I mean, I did quite a lot of things with it whilst I was doing my PhD. And my PhD was really a kind of an excuse to make some interesting things happen.
Tell us a little bit about the writing process for the new album, because I was saying, do you write with sort of parts in mind, thinking, oh, Chris could do this, James could do that? Does that sort of work that way, or do you just sort of write from the head and, it's a case of, right, make of this what you will?
I guess both, yeah. I mean, obviously, definitely knowing people really well, knowing they're playing really well is really helpful. And I kind of embrace that in my writing as well. So just and that's always been the way, I'll write things in response to things that they're interested in, and I could sort of say that about most of my tunes, I'm not going to do that because it would take ages, but I could tell you precisely where their influences and ideas kind of come into it. But yeah, of course, obviously there are also things where I'm kind of dreaming up and go oh, it'd be really cool if so-and-so was playing, that kind of thing. So it is both. But I mean, I guess the brilliant thing about improvised music is that when you kind of get on the stage, it's then, sometimes I think it's actually easier for them than it is for me to play my music, because it's they don't have the baggage of having written it, so they can just get stuck in.
course, Chris Montague and James have been with you right back since Tangent days, haven't they? Going back quite a long way. And even back then in 2010, you were still writing large ensemble as well as small group work. And indeed, going on to your New Generation BBC Award, you got a commission then, I think, to write for the BBC Concert Orchestra. So do you like actually larger scale work? Because you've always involved strings or worked with string players outside of this sort of core group as well. Do you like a big piece to write as a challenge, or do you get more out of dissolving into little small tight group improvisation?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, it's pretty hard to beat, in terms of like playing, it's pretty hard to beat the sort of intimacy that you get from playing in a small group, like when it's really tight, especially, now that I've had kind of the luxury of finding like a really great lineup that I've been able to work with for a number of years, because you just get to a certain, like it kind of takes things to a new level for what you feel you can do.
There's an empathy
on stage.
Yes.
So it's pretty hard to beat that, if I'm honest. It's kind of, it's really interesting working with orchestras. I've just done a piece for like a chamber orchestra, which is different again, because it's kind of got those sorts of sounds, but it's a much smaller, and that it feels easier to get that sort of, with less people, because it's just a people thing, it's like a number of people thing. Just very difficult when you've got like a crazy amount of people on stage to get everyone kind of totally, and especially with the way that orchestral schedules work over here, like you never have enough rehearsal time and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, but having said that, I really enjoy, as you were asking, like I really enjoy the challenge of it.
There's a real sort of thought about the environment, climate change as well. Is that something, sort of the environment, climate change, very, very current issues? Are they sort of issues which inspire some of your music?
I just think all that space that everyone had to reflect on things, it was just very present in people's minds, wasn't it? And just seeing the effect of people not being around and how that really freed up wildlife, unsurprisingly, to come back to cities or, all these sorts of things that normally everybody's too busy to sort of think about. But that's all it was, really. It wasn't really like a plan to raise these issues. It just sort of happened.
Well, speaking of being in your own space, A View with a Room is out on the road again with the album launch coming up April 23rd at the Wigmore Hall, where you were actually chosen as an associate artist back in 2020, I think, and a new move onto Dave Douglas's Greenleaf Music. How did that come about?
So when I'd kind of put it together and I was kind of, I was thinking about putting it out myself, there's all kinds of things that I was thinking about. And I was just chatting to another musician, Nick Smart, who runs the Academy Jazz course, as it happens. Yes. And he knows Dave Douglas really well. They're on different sides of the country, but they've done like a lot of things together. And I was just telling him about the records, and he was like, "Oh, well, who might be interested in that is Dave Douglas." So he introduced us kind of. I did meet Dave actually like years and years ago, and sort of almost in passing at a gig, because I went to go and check out his Soundprints band with Joe Lavarno at Ronnie's. But yeah, Nick just introduced us, and I sent over the music, and Dave had a listen, and he was up for putting it out. So that's what happened. But that was kind of like, autumn last year, so not that long ago, so it was quite a fast turnaround, kind of getting everything done.
Terrific stuff. It's a thoroughly enjoyable album. I keep calling it A Room with a View. A View with a Room.
Yeah.
Get it the right way around. A View with the Room. It is out, I think, CD digital, as Chris says, on Greenleaf on the 22nd of April. We wish you the very best of luck with it. Hopefully you can enjoy touring again. We're back out, and hopefully things can only get better, as they say. And maybe you could choose a track to play us out, a track from the new album.
Amber.
Right. Amber
and Amber's for Amber Bauer, who is the CEO of Donate for Refugees, so that seems quite appropriate, doesn't it? Thanks, you too.
Amber from Trish Clowes' new album, A View with a Room, with her regular...
Got it right, woohoo!
I got it right. I was quite excited about that. Chris Montague, Russ Stanley, Mr. Hammond Organ UK, wonderful and a great pianist as well, and also, of course, James Madron on the drums, one of the smiley drummer brigade rather than the sort of grim-faced drummer. He always has a smile on his face, it seems to me, James, when he's playing. Always nice to see. Terrific stuff. The album's out, like I said, at the end of this month, and hopefully they'll be touring live with that as well. Excellent stuff. And thanks very much indeed to Trish for a lovely chat.
It was fantastic, and she is indeed on tour, and I think you can actually catch them in Liverpool, if you are so minded, this month later on. Next from me, another lively live performance from Greek composer, conductor and educator Stavros Lantsias and his trio live at St Paul's Anglican Church in Athens with As Far As Your Eyes Can See. A lovely chamber jazz session, this, from Stavros Lantsias and his trio live at St Paul's Anglican Church in Athens. Stavros, one of the top names in Greece as a jazz performer and composer for orchestra and film, with a fascinating trio of him on piano, glockenspiel and percussion, Yorgos Kaludis on cello, Uda, tabla and bendir. What is a bendir? I'm not sure. Not a bent ear. And Andreas Polizogopoulos on trumpet and flugelhorn. Very nice indeed.
It is very ECM-y, and you wouldn't think it was live, would you? It was so clean, that recording, that until you hear the applause, you'd have sworn, at least I would have sworn, it was a studio set. Very nice. Right, I told you I'm keeping in with a vaguely Japanese theme in my other music outside of Trish. And this one, well, Pack Up, I'm Coming For You, or Pack Up, Coming For You. It's the latest from Thomas Fujiwara and an album called March. Good stuff, I like his things, quite free, lots of electronic guitars, quite a bit of sort of overkill on it. Have a listen.
Hi, I'm Zoe Rahman. You're listening to Jumping In on Manx Radio with Chris and H. Did I get that right?
Yes, gypsy jazz at its best. It's the latest from Hiromi on her Silver Lining Suite. It's not all like that. Some of it's much more classical, more third stream than Hiromi in many ways, and a good amount of jazz thrown in. It's, yes, the Silver Lining Suite Hiromi Piano Quintet. It's basically Hiromi with a string quartet, as you might have gathered there, and that one, Riviera del Duero. Almost thrown in for fun, you might wonder. Before that, it was Thomas Fujiwara. I'm a bit of a fan of his. I'm growing on with his music, I must admit, after his previous release. This is one just called March. His triple-double ensemble I enjoyed earlier on with Mary Halverson follows off the back of that. Two guitarists, Mary Halverson, Brandon Seabrook. Two trumpets, Ralph Alessi and Taylor Hobynum, on cornet actually. And then Gerald Cleaver also playing drums alongside Thomas Fujiwara. It's powerful, it's quite often in your face, and I rather like it. It's well worth checking out. March. It was recorded just before lockdown, but only released in March of this year.
Where else could you get such a fantastic and eclectic mix of music? Well, the Easter Bunny has just about caught up with us. Thanks to Trish Clowes for taking the time out of her busy touring schedule to talk with us, and good luck for the album launch next Wednesday at the Wigmore Hall. We've just about time to leave you with a track from classical jazz crossover guitarist Diego Barber, here joined by Craig Taborn on a track from his 2021 release, Drago, very kindly sent to us from Sunnyside Records. Here's Cold Spring. Let's hope it warms up.
Roll on, summer. Cheerio.